Hey everybody, welcome to the Ask a Realtor show, number 21. We are excited today because we have a guest. Our guest is attorney Kim Roberti from Paramount Abstract.
Hello.
Our studio audience.
And our topic today is when do you need an attorney in a real estate transaction? So we're going to grill attorney Roberti here with some questions. Who wants to start?
I'll start. The first question is, why do you need an attorney?
Well, having an attorney it's an insurance policy. It's a lot like an insurance policy. You don't always need one till you need one, and in a real estate transaction, you may need one from the beginning and right away. If it comes to the time of closing and you don't have a lawyer there, it's sometimes too late. You don't have the time to run out and the luxury to run out and get someone. So I think it's important. It is a big decision. It is a big investment. So you should get advice right away.
He's going to answer well because he's an attorney.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for him?
At what point in the process should a buyer hire an attorney?
Probably, again, right from the beginning, and it depends on their comfort level. It's, again, if I call it an insurance policy, 49 times out of 50 you don't need one, but when you do need one, you need one. So, and with comfort level, people may want to know what the agreement says. Some people may just want to sign the agreement, they don't care what it says. So.
Very good. All right. Now, in Pennsylvania, a real estate attorney is not required for a real estate transaction, but that's different in some states, correct?
Yep, it is. In some states, attorneys are required. For instance, in New Jersey, there is an automatic attorney review period, meaning once you sign the contract, it's not binding until you've had an opportunity, at least an opportunity, to go see a lawyer, have him or her look over the contract, make suggested changes, and that often results in the lawyer writing a letter saying, I want you to delete this or add this, and it changes the agreement. It's for the protection of the parties.
Very interesting.
Very good. Can you see Christina?
Like, I can't fit you guys all in there.
Let me scooch over.
There you go.
Is this better?
Uh-oh.
Christina, you break it, you bought it.
Yeah.
That's a little better. Let me scooch over more.
Should I take more room for it?
No, you're good. I need to stop eating dessert.
Why? We're live, people. No. What about when a deal starts to fall apart in a real estate transaction?
Well, in that case, all parties should probably at least talk to a lawyer, and there's lots of reasons for that to happen. The down money may be at stake. There may be other liabilities that each party may have. The buyer may be liable to the seller for the entire purchase price. They may not be. I think once it really starts to fall apart, then you at least need a 15-minute phone call to a lawyer. And most realtors that I know a lawyer that's pretty readily available. And I get a lot of those phone calls.
And I'll jump in and mention that we as real estate agents have a duty to tell our clients when they have questions that are beyond our scope. We need to say you need to advise, not advise, consult a real estate attorney. And on every agreement of sale, at the bottom, and on the listing contract, it says if you have legal questions, you're to consult an attorney. So buyers and sellers will see that and hear that advice throughout the process at one point or another. Very good. Who's next?
So on the seller side, when would a seller want to hire an attorney?
And that's on a comfort level as well too, and a lot of this has to do with what people are comfortable with. Oftentimes, most sellers, when they hire attorneys, hire them right from the beginning. It's been my experience, and because they want someone to go over the contract with them, they want someone to explain to them, well, I've paid my property taxes for the year. Do I get those back? And oftentimes those questions can be answered relatively quickly. They want to know sometimes well, what happens if the buyer doesn't buy my property? What are my rights? But oftentimes I don't get those kind of questions till things are really starting to get shaky. So a seller would want to talk to a lawyer right away. And there may be some simple tax questions the lawyer can answer. I know sometimes that I have to tell people, this is beyond me, you need to talk to a tax professional, but probably from a seller's perspective, especially right away.
How often does a for sale by owner contact you?
I get contacted by for sale by owners several times a month. Usually they are somewhat lost in the process. You know, they've shown their house to someone, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, or someone they just found online, and now they've reached an agreement on the price, and they just don't know where to go from there, how to put it in paper. Even if their buyer has been talking to a lender, and the lender is giving them advice on borrowing money, they still need an agreement of sale. And I've seen quite a few times where people just find one on the internet, an agreement on the internet, and pluck it from another state, or it's something that someone else did kind of freehand, and it can be a disaster. Sometimes it's an agreement that looks like an agreement, but isn't legally binding, and it doesn't always, even if it is legally binding, it's not legally binding in the way that people think it is. So especially if you're operating without a realtor involved, I think you need to talk to a lawyer right away. It's really not something you want to try to do on your own.
One of the two, yeah.
So you would work for the seller then, right? If the person called from who's selling their house. And
Well,
work for them.
it can be the seller or the buyer, but you know, and whoever contacts me first is who my client is. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Ah, so be the first one to call. Good. I don't have a whole lot. Do you mainly see it for repair issues and addendums?
Well, that gets back to something I think I hit on when we were talking originally is
You have like a date? And
sometimes, and I think everybody that's sitting around here can testify to it, that sometimes you get to closing and something comes up. The seller hasn't done something they're supposed to do, or during the walkthrough, the furnace isn't working, or the seller is keeping their furniture in the garage until they can move it out because they're moving the next day. And you really need those things down in writing, because once you close, any promises that were made before closing may not be enforceable anymore unless you have something in writing. And even something as simple as, well, we've been told it's going to cost $300 to repair, so we write an agreement saying seller will give buyer $300 for the repair of the dishwasher, and someone forgot to say, well, what happens if it costs more than $300? Who's going to pay for that? Is the seller going to contribute, or is the buyer agree to limit the liability to $300 and will keep anything if they get it repaired for $200? So it is important to draft a well-drafted, well-crafted addendum at closing for those issues. And again, that's something that will come up, and it's too late to hire a lawyer then at that point.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So there are times when it's too late. Oh, you mean after closing?
Well, after closing or at closing. I mean, you can try calling a lawyer to get them there right away. And I guess if they aren't doing anything else, or they're across the street, you might be able to find them, but that could get really difficult. And probably more expensive at that point. Kind of like the emergency plumber service call.
Good analogy there, Ken. Did you learn that in law school? Where did you go to law school?
University of Pittsburgh.
How many years were you there?
I was there 3 years. I like
That's
it.
not
Pittsburgh's a lovely school. What? Law school's 3 years?
Is it?
Yeah. 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of law school.
Good.
So,
And where did you choose Jim Thorpe?
I grew up in Jim Thorpe. When I first graduated law school, I worked in Philadelphia, lived outside of Philadelphia, and I moved back home to work with family. My father's a lawyer at Jim Thorpe too.
We love Tony as well.
Yeah, I do
Shout out
too.
yeah. Oh, I guess, do we still have questions?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
A couple more.
So is this referring to the seller? You guys wrote these notes. So
Yeah.
when you work with a seller, we go back to the seller. How do you advise them on rental properties?
Right.
Oh.
Properties.
For sellers, it's not only a seller's perspective, from a buyer's perspective, and one of the things that we had talked about beforehand is and this is another important issue with having a lawyer, is people buying rental property don't always understand what that means. So I've had people say to me at closing, well, I want to rent. I want to raise the rents. I need to recoup my investment. I want to raise the rents.
Cha-ching.
And the first question is: Are there existing leases? And if there are existing leases, you're stuck with those until they run their term. And you may want someone to look through. You may want a lawyer to look through the leases, because the lease may say, unless you notify the tenant within 30 days of the end of the lease, that it renews under the exact same terms. So, and people don't often understand that.
I don't think buyers understand that they can create a window for, like, within so many days, the seller needs to provide the leases to them so that they can review them and then they can back out of the sale.
You can
I feel
set.
people that they don't know.
Yeah, you can set due diligence periods, so that I have, 5 days to inspect the leases, and if not, I don't want to. And those are the kind of things that could be negotiated at the beginning of the contract. Or zoning issues, right now it's a home, but it's got a space in the front of it, and it's in a more commercial area, and I want to put a knick-knack shop or a hoagie shop or whatever in the front of it. I want to investigate those zoning issues.
And we don't want to give the implication that the only person who has this wisdom is an attorney. No, we as realtors and brokers are trained on most of it. But again, we're trained on the specific, detailed, fits in a box scenarios. So a lot of life doesn't fit in the box scenario. And if you are working with a realtor, again, they will advise you when you have questions or are in a situation that's outside of their learning or scope. So, good. Next.
Isn't hiring an attorney really expensive?
It's not. From a buyer's perspective, for instance, my title company, Paramount Abstract, is owned.
What was the name of that?
Paramount Abstract, 56 Broadway, Jim Gordon. Is owned by attorneys. My father and I. My father started the company in 1980, and we routinely go to closings. We don't charge extra for that, and I oftentimes will get phone calls from buyers before closing, and I don't charge extra for that. What I always tell them is, you're not going to be charged an attorney fee unless I really need to jump in and start spending a lot of time as a lawyer because of whatever issue. Somebody's threatening to sue someone else, and if I really have to spend hours and hours, then there will be a fee. But generally, no. If for a company like ours, and there's other ones out there, I don't need to just use it as my own time, but I do. There are other companies that are owned by attorneys, and you'll oftentimes get an attorney at closing for relatively inexpensive, or no charge at all if they own the title company. And then typically, a lot of times, someone may hire their own outside lawyer from a buyer's perspective or a seller's perspective, and as long as it's not too complicated a transaction, not too commercial transaction, or not too large of a transaction, I've seen fees typically in the $300 to $500 range, sometimes more. Things can get more complicated than that, but if there aren't a whole lot of hours involved, it doesn't get that expensive.
Now, when we have these shows, we usually put our guests on the spot, as our viewers know, and we ask you if there are anything special you can offer to anyone watching this video today that might need your services.
Certainly, and I'd be happy to do it. Anybody with a real estate related question, buying or selling a property, as long as it doesn't create a conflict with me. For instance, I don't represent the other side. I'd be happy to spend 15 minutes on the phone just talking to them. Because there are some questions that can be answered that are really bothering people, causing them to lose sleep at night. They can be answered quickly in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes.
That's
And
valuable.
I don't mind doing that, and I do that a lot.
And that was at no charge.
At no charge, yes.
That's
At no
valuable.
charge.
And does that have an expiration?
Well, since this is going on the internet and will live forever, we'll say till the end of, we're in July 2018, till the end of 2019. And maybe even after
That's
that.
huge.
Wow, that's
really
valuable.
nice. Where's our copy?
Yay.
There you go. Somebody asking all the questions?
I was gonna say, I don't understand this one. Who's that for?
I don't know.
Tax sales and.
Oh, certain kinds of purchases and transfers have more things going on, like a foreclosure or a tax sale.
And I get calls from buyers who there's some buyers are really experienced and they're comfortable with the process, but some buyers may just be getting their foot in the door and thought, well, my cousin Joe had bought a house, fixed it up and sold it, and I think I wanna do that.
Yeah.
And they're buying a
Caveat.
foreclosure or a post-tax sale property, and I get calls from nervous buyers now and then, wanting to know, well, gee, is this really now free and clear? Has the foreclosure taken care of the problems? And we can take a look at the title search and go through it and make sure that all the tax sale problems have been solved.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And I'll just end with a personal note that I've been working with the attorneys at Paramount Abstract for many years, and there's been more than one occasion where something came up, like at settlement, and if an attorney hadn't been there, it may have delayed settlement for a good amount of time, but because the attorney was there, he advised, wrote a letter, and worked things out. Again, that's at the same cost to a buyer, whether it's with any title company. So, yeah. Personally, thank you for being on the show. Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. Hope this was helpful.
Thank you.